Welcome to Saints History, told and experienced the way God intended it, with excessive amounts of alcohol and cursing. The booze is probably bourbon because...
Clear alcohols are for rich women on diets.
Now, here's your Drunk Saints History host, who is...
bombed out of his gourd.
All right, everybody, welcome to a special edition of Saints Happy Hour. This is Saints Drunk History. We haven't done one of these in a while. We're back. Like, we owe people this. We promise them this. We haven't given them enough. I feel like the guy who's on it with me he's Mike. He's our friend from Booking the Territory. He's got a great old school wrestling podcast. It's amazing. I am a patron of it. It's fantastic if you love old school wrestling. I do. I love old school wrestling. I don't like the new stuff. I love him. Mike, I feel like maybe you should be our Saints Drunk History correspondent. I feel like of all the shows we've done, you've been on the most.
Yeah, because we did, what was it, the year 80? I can't even remember. It was 81.
We did 80. We did 83.
83. That's right.
We did 83. We did a Saints playoff game. Like, thing is, people don't understand. Mike is texting me all the time. Mike texts me just ideas for Drunk History. And
yeah.
And we always say we're going to get to them. And this one, we're going to get to. This topic, Mike, is Bobby Hebert's trash in the playoffs. And as I get older, like, players that like might have bothered me like a long time ago, I like, my heart warms to them and I ease up on them. Like Jason David, we were like, oh, he's terrible in the moment. Now I'm like, he did his best. Bobby Hebert is one of those people, like, the older I get, the more I hate him. Like, he is responsible for Jim Mora not winning a playoff game with the Saints. And he was terrible he was mediocre for the Saints. Like, the thing was, in the 80s and 90s, we didn't have advanced stats. All we had was the newspaper and Buddy D, and that was it. And, like, the discussion on talk radio was, it's Jim Mora's fault. It's Carl Smith's fault. It's play calling. No, dude, Bobby Hebert, like, him as Saints quarterback, and I know they threw a lot of interceptions in the 80s and 90s with quarterbacks, but, like, there is no reason for Bobby Hebert to throw 19 touchdowns and 16 interceptions in 1992. Like, that's unacceptable when you have the Saints defense that they had. And I know they couldn't run the ball and they threw the ball way more than you thought. But, like, my thing is, nowadays, if the Saints had that early 90s defense and Bobby Hebert was the quarterback, it even wouldn't matter that he was local. We'd be like, get him out of here. He is a turnover machine, and we got to get better. We need a game manager who doesn't turn the ball over left and right. By the way, Bobby Hebert, he never threw 20 touchdown passes with the Saints. And, like, you could say, well, the Saints ran the ball. The Saints in 1991 and 92, their running game stunk. Yep. And I blame Bobby for all of it, and we're going to go through it blow by blow. But his playoffs, they were horrifically bad. I'm talking awful in ways. When I went back and did this research, I was like, oh my God. Like, I wanted to punch Bobby Hebert in the face doing research on the 1991 Falcons playoff game. Just horrific.
Yeah, let me tell you how this idea came to be, Ralph. So,
first, tell people what you're drinking. I'm drinking Ballantyne turtle caramel bourbon with cherry Coke. The diabetes is overwhelming me. I'm on my fourth one.
I am drinking what I always drink, Hennessy, and unless I'm sitting in the Caribbean somewhere where I'll have a mojito, I'm drinking Hennessy. So it's the only way to go. Straight, a little Cuba ice, and good to go.
There you go.
Continue. Let me tell you how I came up with the idea of Bobby Hebert Drunk Saints History. And before I say anything, Bobby was terrible in the playoffs. We're going to cover that. This is not personal, but I started thinking about where we were in 2021 with quarterbacks with the Saints, right? Drew Brees retired in the offseason. Jameis comes in. Jameis's results, he was 5-2 as a starter. But, depending on who you talk to, they're like, well, what did he show us? Blah, 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 blah. And then we've seen Taysom. We've seen Trevor. We saw Ian Book. I don't even want to count that game. So I started to think about, okay, if you're a young Saints fan and all you knew was Drew Brees, Like you're beyond spoiled. Like we're all
That's right.
spoiled,
That's
but
right.
you're beyond spoiled because you didn't live through Bobby Hebert, Dave Wilson, Richard Todd, the Billy Joes. You didn't live through all that. So then I started thinking like, man, we're so spoiled because nobody's ever going to replace Drew Brees. It's just not going to happen. He's top 5 all time in my opinion. So we're never going to get there, which makes it even harder. But for you and I, who experienced the playoffs with quarterbacks other than Drew, like Bobby and John Forcade in 1990 when Bobby was out, man, when you go back and look at the stats, I mean, looking at the stats from these games is one thing. Actually watching them, which I did, is another altogether. Bobby was a train wreck of epic proportion.
People talk about the Patrick Mahomes AFC Championship, how he was magnificent in the first half, and then he was Jimmy Garoppolo bad in the second half. Like, that was Bobby in those playoff games. Like, he would death spiral. Like, he death spiraled in the Eagles game, which we'll get to, the Falcons game, the Minnesota game. I mean, it's just, the thing is with Bobby is he's sort of in the mythology of Saints fans because he was the first quarterback we had that he won games, right? And we're like, he's a winner. He gave the Saints heart. Like, here's the thing with Bobby in 1990 when he held out for the season. Like, he had a horrific 1990 season in a sense of this. He didn't play, but his sister committed suicide. His dad got cancer. The Saints tried to screw him on money. But here's the thing that gets lost in history is Jim Finks was 100% correct in being like, I don't want to pay Bobby Hebert. I think we need a new quarterback. Like, he was 100% correct, but history doesn't judge him that way because Jim Finks didn't want to pay anyone. Like, he'd be like, Pat Swillen, you got defensive MVP? Maybe you should make less. Like, he nickeled and dimed everyone on the Saints. I think every star in my childhood, the Saints held out. Ricky Jackson, Pat Swillen, like they all fought with Jim Finks over money. So like history doesn't judge Jim Finks well because he's like, you tried to screw Bobby Hebert and you were cheap. And he should have Jim Finks, what he should have done in 1990, he should have traded with the Raiders, taken Marcus Allen in the second round pick. Like that's what he should have done. And Jim Morrow would have won a playoff game. I'm just going to throw that out there. Because you know what? In 1991 or 1992, if the Saints would have had Marcus Allen, they would have won a playoff game.
Yeah, because the running game was so terrible those years. I mean, it was atrocious, especially in the playoffs.
Oh my God! Let's start with this is because the drunk history. The title of this is Bobby Ayer's trash in the playoffs. The '87 playoff game, which, I mean, yeah, he was so bad they yanked him in the '87 game.
Well, technically, he got banged up. He did get banged up. He did. He got hit on a pass, I believe, or maybe it was even a run play. I don't even remember. But he got banged up, and you could see him come out. He's like a little groggy, but then he never came back in. The thing was, when he went out, and I have to look at my stats exactly. I think he was when he went out, he ended the game 9 of 19 for 84 yards, 1 TD, and 2 interceptions, and a fumble. I think he had the fumble. I know he had
That's
two
correct.
INTs. But so he technically didn't get yanked. But here's the problem. That was midway through the third quarter when that happened, when he was 9 of 19 for 84 yards. So, and it was already, I believe, 31-10 at that point. He was not moving the ball. The offense was stuck in mud. It was bad. Now, as fans, that was our first playoff experience. You and I, early fans since the early 80s, honestly, a Saints fan nowadays would never be just happy to get to the playoffs. We were just happy to be there. I mean,
the Dome gave the Saints a standing ovation. They were getting their head kicked in
right.
Literally, the Dome stood up and was like, "Thank you. This has been amazing." And it was because it was like they hadn't had a winning season for the first 20 years. Like the Saints, people don't understand it. I was arguing with people about this. Like I was arguing with old head Saints fans on Twitter. The thing with the Saints, and this will never not blow my mind. In the 1960s, the NFL awarded New Orleans an expansion team because they wanted to get into the New Orleans market, because in the 60s, New Orleans was a bigger market than it is now. And it was like, we got to get into New Orleans before the AFC gets in. So they awarded the Saints expansion team. And the NFL, in their wisdom, was like, who should be an owner for the Saints? And they were like, you know who should be an owner for the Saints? A 26-year-old whose dad is a Texas billionaire. They thought it was a great idea to let a 26-year-old own a fucking football team. I can't even wrap my head around the insanity of that. So that 87, his playoff performance, like we were like, it's all right. Like we made the playoffs. They went 12-3. It was fine, you know. But he was awful in that.
Yeah, he was awful. I mean, even I believe the score was 24-10 in the second half. They were getting a little drive. I think they really weren't getting the drive together. The drive had just started. They had fallen behind, but there was a punt return for a touchdown. So I mean, without the punt return, it's only they're down 17-10. So I mean, they're starting to get a drive going, right? What does Bobby do? Picked off. Second one of the game at midfield. Minnesota ends up throwing a Hail Mary at the half. They go in 31-10. You kind of knew there, all right, this just ain't their day. But hey, like you said, the fans gave him a standing ovation. Yeah. But Bobby was atrocious in that game. I mean, he was 9 of 19, 84 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. He did not look good. But I think we all forgave him because we got there and we got the playoff experience. Now, after that point, that's a different story.
Well, we're going to get to 1991. I'm going to share my screen with you, Mike. And this is the Chris Berman. I don't have the highlight. I'm not going to play the sound. We're going to play the highlights of Saints Falcons in 1991. This game, I'll never forgive him for this because this is like Atlanta, our most hated rival. They got Dion. Like the Saints come out in this game and they are kicking the Falcons' butt early. They got a rough in the penalty on Tommy Barnhart. Hebert comes out and the Saints offense is it's humming. Like they're moving the ball there. They're driving. He's looking good. And this is kind of Bobby's thing in these second two playoff games. Like the offense, Carl Smith had a great plan. Look at that. Look at Floyd, wide open touchdown. It's 7-0 Saints. Look at the Dion playing zone, confused Floyd. Look at I could have caught that pass, Mike. Look at that.
Yeah, you could have.
I could have. So then the Saints get it. They're moving the ball again. People wide open, running free. Look at this. They're moving the ball. And the thing is, like, this is 19. Look at it. This pick. Look at this. Horrific. Like, you can't throw a red zone pick when you're up 7-0, Bobby, And the Saints, the thing was, like, they kept on coming on defense early. They kick it, they get up, they're up 10, but they couldn't move the ball. They're up 10-0. And I'm not gonna play the rest of it because I don't want to watch. Look at Atlanta. Like Atlanta is self-destructing early in this game. And guess what? The Saints couldn't take advantage because Bobby threw the red zone pick. The offense didn't move. Like the Saints in this game should have been up. I've seen enough. They should have been up 17-21-0. That game should have been a party. We should hold that over the Falcons fans' head forever. That should be in the canon with 28-3. But you know why it's not? Because Bobby Hebert was trash.
Yeah, I was at that game. So I wasn't at the Minnesota game, but I was at that one. And I remember feeling like, when he threw that pick, I was like, dang. Because that's your time to go up 14-0. But then Atlanta gets the ball back, but then I think the Saints got a turnover and then they drive and get the field goal. But it was at that moment that you're like, they're squandering opportunities because like you said, the defense was playing well. This was not like the Minnesota game. In the Minnesota game, Minnesota ended up like 400 and something yards. The Saints, they controlled the ball. I think Minnesota had 41 minutes of time of possession. So they dominated.
The thing that was weird about Minnesota in 87 was if you look at the box here, like the Saints were 12-3, Minnesota was 8-7. Like that should be a mismatch. But the thing is, 87, they had to strike.
Right.
Minnesota was one of those teams. They weren't prepared. Their strike team, they went 0-3, got their head kicked in. So they were really, they were an
11-5 team.
If you take out the 3 strike games, the Saints were 10-2, and Minnesota was 8-4. And
Right.
then you look at it, you're like, it's a pretty close game. So anyway, that was the Minnesota game. But the Atlanta game, it just bothered me because the Saints, they completely and utterly should have dominated Atlanta. Like Atlanta, they just were awful in the first half, and the Saints couldn't move the ball and they couldn't close out the game on Atlanta. And it was because Bobby Hebert was trash in the game. Like,
yeah, you can't that interception, Ralph, at the 5-yard line, wherever they were on that was the second drive of the game. That interception, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that's the reason they lost, but if you go up 14-0 right there, you've got your division opponent on the road. It's gonna put that doubt in their mind. Oh, God damn it! Here we go again. You're like, we can't do this.
But here's the thing: like, even after that, like Chris Miller would fumble twice more.
Right?
And he fumbled twice. They sacked him 5 times. Like, can you imagine if the Saints had got up 17-0, 21-0? Like, they literally would have sacked him 8, 9, 10 times. Like Atlanta, for that first half, they couldn't block the Saints, and they kind of figured it out, but they just hit a bunch of big plays. I mean, Michael Haynes, of course. I refuse to watch that. I'm not going to subject people to that. They should report me on YouTube for that. That's a hate crime. I'm not going to submit the people to the touchdown of Michael Haynes. But like Chris Miller was only 18 of 30, and but Bobby Hebert, like he threw another pick late in the game. When the Saints were trying to drive down and tie, like he was awful. His rating was 65, and you can excuse it and say, well, it was a different time. Quarterbacks tried to push the ball down the field. But like in every big game the Saints ever had, Bobby Hebert was garbage. And today we would destroy Bobby Hebert. And I know in 1 year in 92, he was the 9th rated quarterback. And I know it's different to compare eras, but I just feel like if we would have had just a little bit more knowledge in 91, 92, we'd have crushed him. We'd have been why are you turning the ball over so much? Like we get on Jameis for his 2021 season. He didn't hit his completion percentage was good. The offense wasn't good, but like Jameis in 2021, that's what the Saints needed in 1991, 92. Like you just needed a dude that threw for like 3,000 yards and like had like 18 touchdowns and like 4 interceptions. Like that's what the Saints needed. Like they needed a game manager. And oh, by the way, Walsh and Hebert were basically almost identically quarterback rating in 1991 when Bobby missed a ton of games. Like,
yeah. And Bobby Hebert was a career like 58, 59% completion percentage. Like, I mean, just think about that. He wasn't even completing 6 out of 10 balls. So that's why I say we're spoiled when we think about Breeze, when you think about how high his percentage is. But, and it's not fair to compare the two. It's just understanding how big of a jump. And again, you said it, Ralph. It's hard to describe, or it's hard to understand the difference in times because defenses were different. I mean, they allowed you to mug receivers a lot more than down. So you got to keep that stuff into perspective. But all that said, like you said, I mean, Bobby Hebert, 9 of 19 against Minnesota, then in Atlanta, 26 of 44, 1 TD, 2 interceptions. But even then in the Atlanta game, I still hadn't really got to the point where I'm like, this guy's trash. Like I hadn't gotten there yet, but things changed. I don't know if you got anything else from Atlanta, but things changed.
I mean, I look at this box score. It makes me sad. Like the Saints 8 of 15 on third down.
Yep.
I mean, although Atlanta was 6 of 10, like just like the Saints were a superior team to Atlanta. Atlanta went 10-6, but they won a game on a Hail Mary against San Francisco. Like Atlanta was a fraud, and they were never that good again, close to that good under Jerry Glanville. Like this game breaks my heart, and I fully blame Bobby Hebert for I fully blame him for this. And I don't care. Like people are going to find this on Twitter and they're going to come at me, and I don't care. Like Bobby Hebert is horrible. I hate him. He's on my most hated like Saints players ever. Because Jim Jim Mora is going to die not winning a playoff game, and it's Bobby Hebert's fault. And I'm drunk, and I don't care.
Yeah, I don't hate Bobby, but it's hard. It's hard not to put the playoff losses on him. And I need to point out, he didn't play on the road. They were at home.
That's right.
They're in the dome.
They were in the dome.
He's not dealing with a hostile crowd. He's in the dome for all three of these losses. Like, you have to keep that in perspective.
And the thing is, like, as bad as the Atlanta losses, and the Atlanta loss hurts me more because it's the Falcons, and the Saints were clearly better. The Eagles loss.
Oh, God.
The Eagles loss, some people take it even harder because here's the thing. And history's cruel to Carl Smith, and rightfully so. Like, I'm not gonna say Carl Smith was some genius and he was some great offensive coordinator. I'm not gonna tell you that. But what I am gonna tell you is that Philadelphia defense, like the Saints and the Eagles in the early 90s, like those were the teams. They would allow like 200 points a year. Like, that Eagles defense was ridiculous. Reggie White, Clyde Simmons, Eric Allen, Mark McMillan, Seth Joyner, Andre Waters, the safety that could kill people when it was legal. Like, that Philadelphia defense was amazing. And in that playoff game, in that first half, Carl Smith was pantsing them, freaking pantsing them. Like, the Saints were up 20-6 at the half, and they should have been up more because they couldn't quite. The Saints always had like red zone issues.
Yeah.
You know, but they were up 20-7 at the half, and they, like, the only thing the Eagles did in the entire first half, Randall Cunningham hit Fred Barnett for a bomb. And like, Bobby in this game, like, again, like, his quarterback rating was worse than the Falcons game, where it was 65, and the Falcons, it was 58.8, 29 of 30, 23 of 39, 291 yards, a touchdown, 3 interceptions. Like, horrific. Just like, and in the second half, Philadelphia started to get to him, even though he only got sacked once. Like, he was a basket case the second half of this game. Like,
the second half was so bad because the Saints really couldn't move the ball. I think they had one first down in the third quarter, and they had a drive going where they had like a 3rd and 1, and they didn't convert it. So then they went up. I think that's when they went up 20-7. So they go into the fourth. I think the Eagles actually kicked a field goal right before into the third. So I think it was
in the third. It was 20-10. It was 20-10.
It was 20-10 going into the fourth. Okay.
Yep.
But you could tell if you watched it, the body language was shifting. You're right, Ralph. They had them going in the first half. If the Saints can freaking put the damn ball in the end zone, the game gets out of it can get out of reach. And look, back then, I know earlier that day Buffalo came back from 35-3 down to Houston, but comebacks of 21 or more, like in the 80s and 90s, they didn't happen. Now, as I say that, earlier that day, that's when the record was set, when Buffalo came back against Houston. But teams just didn't like come back. The rules were so different, and they weren't slated to the offensive side like they are now. So it was harder to come back, in my personal opinion. But they were up 20-10, but you could tell the body language was changing. You can find the game on YouTube and go watch it. Things were changing.
I'm not sharing that.
And
I'm not doing that to people.
And you could see, like, the when it got to 20-10, this is the moment that it crumbled. So first off, Cunningham hits Fred Barnett with like a 35-yard TD. Okay, so he catches another
ridiculous,
TD.
Just ridiculous
ridiculous throw and catch. I mean, if you watch that throw and catch, it's unbelievable that he makes the catch. It's a good throw. It's a great throw by Randall. But they held Randall in check. I mean, Randall didn't get loose on the ground. The Saints defense held their own against Randall, and Randall was a good QB. I really liked Randall Cunningham as a QB. He was before his time, but they held Randall in check. They really did, in my personal opinion. Now, after that TD, it really unwinds. Bobby, on the next play after the touchdown, He's moving to his left, throws across his body, trying to hit Eric Martin. Seth Joyner picks it off. Philly puts that in the end zone. We go now it's 24-20. Now you're like, well, the Saints are still in it. No, because Bobby is rattled to his core. Then they get the safety, Ralph.
That's good. Yeah.
and then he throws a pick six. And at that point, you're like, this dude's got to go. It's a death spiral.
It's a death spiral. This is what the 90s were like, kids. And granted, like the Saints and Eagles, their defenses were ferocious. The over under for this playoff game was 35. I mean, that's a playoff game. Like, that is ridiculous. And you know what? Like, I think you can make the case, like, if you like going into that game, you could be like, yeah, like 35, like this is going to be like a 16-10 game. Like the over under in that game was big. But like, that's the thing, like Bobby spiral, and like the Saints didn't re-sign him after this, and they went to Wade Wilson, and the Moore era was kind of over. And the thing was, like, Saints fans were stunned about it, that like, oh, they didn't re-sign him and he went to Atlanta. But like, the Saints just didn't, like, Jim Finks, like, just didn't make the case. Like, it was always about money and this and that. Like, they just didn't make the strong, like, the case was Bobby sucks in these playoffs games. We need a better quarterback. Now, is it Wade Wilson? No, maybe not. But like, that's the case of like, Bobby Hebert is just not good enough. Like, that was a strong case. The Saints just never articulated in a way. And I just look back at these playoff games, and I don't want to hear about the 80s quarterbacking was different and this and that. Like, Bobby Hebert's fourth quarter against the Eagles, that's bad quarterbacking in 1992. It's bad quarterbacking in 1950. It's bad quarterbacking now. Like, that's just horrifically bad quarterback. And I don't like the fact that Bobby Hebert is kind of, people try to wash it away and rewrite history. And it's not Bobby's fault. He's good on the radio. He gives us a chuckle and blah, blah, blah. It was Jim Moore. It was Carl Smith. No, listen to me. Look at the camera, Mike. It's Bobby Hebert's fault. And I'm Bobby was bad in the playoffs. Let me throw one other stat at you, Ralph. I don't know if you thought about this, but so the Saints played 4 playoff games between the 87 and 92 seasons, right? That's
and like
right.
you said, in 90, the 90 season, that's when Bobby wasn't with the Saints because he sat out, and then he had the dad with cancer and the sister with the problem.
Vince Buck wasn't offsides against the Bears. That should have been a block. That should have been a blocked field goal. The Saints should have won that game.
So we need to do a drunk Saints history on that, but that'll come for another time. Yeah, that's right. But the funny part is they lost to Minnesota 44-10 in 87 wild card, right? They lost to Atlanta 27-20. They lost to Philly, was it 36-20?
That's right.
Okay. The closest playoff game they played in that stretch of 4 playoff appearances from 87 to 92 was the game Bobby didn't play when they went to Chicago on the road and lost 16-10. And by the way, like you said, Vince Buck still wasn't freaking offsides. So my point is, I think it was 4K, and who the hell else came in for 4K?
It was Walsh.
Walsh
it was Walsh, and then 4K got hurt.
That's right.
I think it was. I want to say that game in 1990. I want to say that playoff game was 16.
I think it was 16-10.
It was 16 to. I want to say it was 16-6. So the closest game was closest game was the Falcons game. That's right. Point taken. I mean, like it wasn't any different. Like, it wasn't any different.
Right.
The games that he didn't quarterback. Like, I mean, it was bad, but like,
I mean, it's only 6 points, but to the point I was trying to make was, like, they didn't play that much worse. The one playoff game where Bobby was in there. Oh, and by the way, they were on the road in the quote unquote cold in Chicago. And if the refs don't botch that call, like, that was a 10-point swing. If that call does not get reversed, not reversed, but you know what I mean? They don't say Vince Buck was offside.
It was a 10-point swing because Chicago couldn't score. Saints
couldn't score.
Chicago couldn't score either.
The Saints defense was on it that game. They were on it. They were phenomenal.
That defense for the Saints, like the 1990 team, like the defense like coalesced and like got great. Like the second, the last month of the year, like that defense was like, yeah, this defense is awesome now, and it's gonna be, But to the point you were making, Ralph, Bobby, look, I was wrong about that. It wasn't 16-10, like you said, 16-6. So they lost by 10. My point is that game from an offensive perspective, and I know we can look at the stats. Bobby there was probably more yards in the Atlanta game and Philly game, but the offense, it wasn't that much different in Chicago as it was. And again, by the way, Bobby was at home for all three, but the Eagles game was like the icing on the cake. Those turnovers at the end, and if you watch Bobby's body language against the Eagles in that fourth quarter, it's hard. It is. Shook. It's like he was so shook. He was shook.
You will. I mean, if you were a fan to feel that emotion during the time, and even if you went back and watched it now, I'm telling you, you would look at that and go, "Wow, Jameis, Trevor, Taysom, none of them are that bad." It's so like it gives you a different perspective on quarterbacking with the Saints. Now, our bar is a lot higher because we got to experience Breeze.
No, I mean that's not even a bar. I mean, just don't turn the ball over.
Yeah, like, that's true too.
I'm not even saying give me completion percentage. Just don't turn the fucking ball over. Like that's it. And the thing is, like the Saints, their problem is in the 91-92 is they couldn't really run the ball. So Moore was on Bobby, but Bobby bombed in the big situations. Like you can say, well, Moore was on his plate and they depended on him more. Absolutely. But his fourth quarter is as bad a fourth quarter in a big Saints games as you could ever have. Like he was atrocious. And the thing was, like, if the Saints they got hoodwinked by Jimmy Johnson because Steve Walsh, he had, his arm was barely stronger than mine. So they got hoodwinked on that. But if the Saints if Steve Walsh had been good, if they traded for, like, I 100% get back to the beginning of this podcast, they would have, Jim thinks he just wanted to fuck Bobby Hebert. Like it was like principle with him. But like the Raiders wanted Bobby Hebert. Like the Saints should have traded for Marcus Allen and got the second round pick and then figured out something else at quarterback. Like, because Marcus Allen, I know he was older then, but he was still really, really good for Kansas City for a couple of years later. Like he was maybe the best goal line back in the history of football. Like he would have been exactly what the Saints needed. And you could have plugged in a chair at quarterback and it would have been the same in the playoffs. So like, it breaks my heart because Jim Mora deserved to win a playoff game and Bobby Hebert kept him from it. And I know I've said that like 4 times, but I'm drunk and I'm angry. All these playoffs, like my childhood trauma.
It's just the turnovers, Ralph. So I remember when I texted you this, I said, look, go look at Bobby Hebert's. I said, go look at his stats from the playoffs. Okay. And his stats in the playoffs. So we've talked about how bad he was, but here are his combined stats: 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, QB rating of 57.1, completion percentage of 56.86. He completed 58 of 102 passes. It's horrendous. I mean, like if any Saints quarterback went out there nowadays and turned the ball over like that, you would be calling for their head the next day. Yeah. And he just was bad. It's no other way to put it. I'm like you said, I'm harder on, and I think you're the same way. We're harder on Bobby now than we were then because we didn't have all the advanced stats and analytics like we do now. But now when you watch it, you're like, you said it, Ralph, just don't turn the ball over. Just don't stop throwing interceptions. And some of those interceptions, there was one in the Minnesota game where Chris Dolman is about, the first one he threw against Minnesota, Chris Dolman's about to light him up. He just chunks the ball up in the air. I'm like, dude, where's it going? It's just sailing like a duck high in the air.
Here's the thing. Jimmy Garoppolo, people murder him about how bad he is in the playoffs. 60% completion, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Like, basically, Hebert is like dollar store Jimmy Garoppolo. That's what he was. That's what he was. And people crucify Jimmy Garoppolo. And if the Saints trade for Jimmy Garoppolo or he gets cut and he's their quarterback, I will throw up in my mouth.
I can't. I can't,
like,
Ralph, if they do that. I can't. I mean, it's my team, so I'm obviously going to tune in, but don't do that, Saints, please.
No, I mean, and we're doing this drunk history, and people, you'll get it Monday morning, so the Saints won't have a coach, you know. But quarterback, it matters, and I just feel like with Bobby Hebert, I want to crucify him because I want to change people's perception of him. I don't want people to love him and make it be he's cuddly and he's caged and he's from Louisiana. I don't want people to think that. I want people to think he was a disaster in 3 playoff games, an utter disaster.
Let me ask you a question. Oh, go ahead, continue. But I want to
go ahead. That was it. That's all I want.
What did Buddy D used to say about Bobby? If you ever asked him about Bobby,
I mean, Buddy was always like the Saints offense was limited and he was more favorable to Bobby. But again, back in that time, we didn't have even an understanding of what was going on as far as advanced stats back in that age, you know? And the thing is, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have these different discussions of fame. So like the narrative of it's Carl Smith's fault, it's Jim Mora being too conservative, like that overrid everything.
Yeah.
You know? Whereas now you have so many different voices and channels. Like there's ways to slice and dice things, but Bobby Hebert, he was just terrible. Like he was awful in every big game, the 3 playoff games and other big games the Saints had. Bobby was terrible. Like against San Francisco in games that could have maybe won a division title. In the Flipper Anderson game in 1988 when they go 10-6 on ESPN, like he was terrible in that second half, and he got benched. You know, late, like, well, it was 1989, right? He got benched because he was terrible in that second half. They went to Detroit. They were flat. He was terrible again. Like, every big moment the Saints had, Bobby was terrible.
You know,
like,
it's funny, too. Like,
I'm a broken record, but I'm so drunk. So I can't recommend Caramel Bourbon enough.
One other thing. So, in 87, I can't remember the exact stat, but I believe the Saints blocked 8 kicks in that season, right, including the strike games, and they returned 7 of them for TDs. So, and I'm making a point here. And I think in 91 and 92, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe in those years they were 1-2 or 2-1 in total defense in the league. And the reason I point those stats out to you is because I don't know if there's ever been a QB that was carried more by his defense than Bobby Hebert. Because, and again, let me repeat, when you talk about 7 return touchdowns for TDs on kicks, I mean, that's 56 points. That's a huge swing. All right. And the defense wasn't 1 or 2 in 87, but they were good. But then when you talk about 91 and 92 to be as good as they were, and like you said, Ralph, I mean, it was basically the Saints and Eagles who had the top defenses during those years. Like you had those teams were truly carried by the defenses. And the fact that they could not get a playoff win, I hate it, but you have to put it on Bobby Hebert's shoulders because
this encapsulates how the defense carried everything with the 1991 Saints and 92. The 1991 Saints were 5-0.
Mm-hmm.
They went to Philadelphia. They won 13-6.
I remember that.
Bobby Hebert got hurt in the game. He was 2 of 8.
Mm-hmm.
He was 2 of 8 with 2 interceptions. He got sacked twice. He got knocked out of the game. Steve Walsh came in, was 8 of 17. For a touchdown, and the Saints won the football game. The Saints had 98 net yards passing and won a football game.
Yep.
And don't pretend that it was the 90s, it was different. No, 98 yards passing in the 90s sucked. Philadelphia though had six turnovers. Like they played their quarterbacks were Brad Gable and Pat Ryan, and the Saints Dome Patrol did exactly what you would think they would do to Brad Gable or Gable and Pat Ryan. Like they ate them whole like steak to lions. But like that's what the Saints were. Like Bobby wasn't good. Like he was just there. You literally could have replaced him with almost anyone, and the results would have been the same. It couldn't have been any worse in the playoffs.
Sometimes I wonder too. You and I were. I say we were young. I mean, in '87, we were just because. No, we weren't even teenagers yet. And in 1992, we were young teenagers, right? I wonder if it's like when you think about it. I remember a lot of old head Saints fans at the time were like, "Oh, I mean, he's fine. Look what he did in the USFL," because that was the thing. Like, I don't know if a lot of people realize that. He won a title in the USFL, right? So,
that's right.
So
Michigan.
like he had that aura about him that he won a title in the USFL, and the USFL. No matter what you want to say about it, that version of it, I mean, there were a lot of really good football players. Just look at Sam Mills.
No, I mean, listen, the Saints, Bobby Hebert was one of the quarterbacks to get in the USFL, and Tom Benson paid him a good bit of money in '85. I think it was like 3 years, like $5 million, which in '85 was a lot of money. Was upper to middle tier quarterback money, but like the Saints. One of the things that Bum Phillips did that was great was his USFL dispersal draft. Vaughn Johnson was their first round pick.
Yeah.
Mel Gray. Like they nailed it in the USFL. They got a bunch of good players. So, I mean, Bobby was beloved. And the reason those 80s and early 90s Saints teams are so beloved by a lot of people, and I love them too. I just hate Bobby Hebert, is not only did they win, but Bobby Hebert was your quarterback. Eric Martin was your number one receiver. Dalton Hilliard was your star running back. All Louisiana people. Like that will never happen again.
Never.
Like you'll never have that. And you don't have that with other teams either. Like you won't have, a team from New York, whatever. Like that is what really sort of bonds a lot of people. Like, it was not only was it the first time the Saints ever won, but they won with Louisiana kids. And so that made it special. But I love this podcast. Maybe it won't do as well because it'll be negative, but I don't care. I feel like we need to set history right.
Yeah,
we need to set history right. That the playoff losses, it isn't Jim Mora, it's Bobby Hebert. I just say it again. I know people are like, Ralph is drunk on this podcast. He said it like 6 times, but whatever. I don't care.
I was in my right mind, Ralph, when I texted you. I said drunk Saints history on Bobby Hebert's playoff performances. I was in my right mind. I had not been drinking. Yeah. I just started thinking about it. It was the Philly game that triggered me. And then I went back and started looking. I was like, man, he was just bad. Like there's no other way to slice it. Bad.
I think we need to do 1990 and we need to do 87.
90 it would be phenomenal.
90 is wild because they go
they
8
started
and 8.
2 and they started 2-5.
They started 2-5 and they finished 8-8, and it was wild. But the thing and it still is, I mean, it's not like NFC Championship winning in the Dome, but I would say like of my like top 5 moments in the Dome ever, the 1990 game where the Saints are 7-8, they're playing on Monday night, New Year's Eve. This is back when ESPN, the Monday Night Football was on ABC, but they didn't really care about. They were like, oh, we'll put a game on New Year's Eve, cool, like whatever. Like now they'd be like, no, we're not going to put a game on New Year's Eve. People aren't going to watch. The ratings aren't going to be as good. They didn't really care as much about that stuff because we didn't have as much things to do. We didn't have the internet. Like you had 3 channels. Like of course you're going to fucking watch Monday Night Football on New Year's Eve. That's what I was. So like the Saints, it fell right for them. Atlanta actually beats Dallas And so Monday night, 7-8 Saints playing the Rams. Saints win, they're in. And it was New Year's Eve. And it's one of my most favorite memories as a Saints fan, because that was still back where the Saints, up until that point, hadn't been to the playoffs one time. And I'm telling you, Morton Anderson kicked that field goal at the gun. People are going out New Year's Eve, emptying the dome. And I'm like, with 1990, so I was like 14 at the time. And people are just drunk. And they are like, we are going to fucking party in New Orleans on New Year's Eve. The Saints are going to the playoffs. We don't care that they're 8-8. Like, it was just this utter joy, like leaving the stadium. And I have to say, like, the only times that I can say that the joy was as close to that was the first playoff win with Azakim drops the ball, the NFC Championship, and the playoff win in 2006. Like, that's the only time in my life where I left the dome and it was that just ridiculous of fun. Like, and we gotta do it. We gotta do more drunk history. We use the whole revenue thing of this podcast is based. This is how we started. We started drunk history because my computer broke and I needed to fundraise for a computer. Yeah. So we started doing drunk history. So, and it's grown from that, and it's a great community. But like we need to do more drunk history, Mike, in the offseason. We need to do more. I hereby christen you our official Drunk Saints history correspondent.
Yeah, I'm down with that. We need to do 1990 because I was at that game New Year's Eve too, and I was in the last row in the terrace, banging the wall as a 14-year-old, however old I was at the time, 15, whatever.
I mean, we've been in 640 section 641 my entire time as a Saints. The only thing is we section 641, we've moved up and down in the section, but we've never actually left the section.
Yeah, we were on the last row, and I love the last row of the terrace because you got the metal things you just bang on. Oh my God, they make so much noise. But yeah, we were there, and that was a phenomenal game. And like you said, Morton kicks that field goal through. And I remember a buddy of mine recorded that, and we can talk about it on the 90 when we do it. But he recorded it, and I remember watching it after because I was there, so you don't hear the commentary, right? But when you go back and watch it and watch the ABC broadcast of it, it's phenomenal. Listen to what's his name say, they'll go to Chicago. I remember that. They'll go to Chicago. Like, yeah. And it was a feeling. It's like, oh, we're going to Chicago. How the hell we do this? Steve Walsh and John Forkade are our QBs. We're going. We don't know.
We're getting a playoff game. We're gonna play. We don't care. We're playing a playoff. We're playing a playoff game in Idaho. We don't give a fuck.
Yep.
So, Mike, before we get out of here, tell the people how to find your podcast. I cannot recommend it enough. He has many different tiers you can support him. It's Booking the Territory. Tell the people how to get it. I freaking love this podcast because I like to pretend wrestling ended in like 1995 and it doesn't exist. Anything happened after 1995 didn't happen. But tell the people how to find your podcast and what it is.
Yeah, you can go to tinyurl.com/bttpod. That'll take you to the direct link to our site. Or you can just search Booking the Territory wherever you get your podcast from, wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, any podcast platform. And basically, we cover all old school wrestling. Right now, we're into 1990 on our NWA Saturday Night on TBS recap show. So we're past the days when they were in the studios on TBS. Now they're out into the arenas and different things. But it's a fun time. And the thing about old school wrestling is not politically correct at all. There's crazy stuff that always happens. So like we discuss the like utter insanity that you see on many of these episodes and the things that are said. It's kind of like watching Archie Bunker at times, and you think about wrestling, you go, what do you mean? No, it really is. There are things that are said that you go, wow, if they did that today, somebody would be,
I watch it, I'm like, they're going to cancel Dusty. They're going to go back in time and cancel Dusty Road Dusty. You can't say that about women in the kitchen. Like, you can't. It's just, but like, it's just a different time. And the thing is, like, wrestling is really like, it's kind of like cartoons for men. Like, that's what wrestling is, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it was a soap opera for us back in the day as kids too. But tinyurl.com/BTT pod. Just search Book in the Territory wherever you get your podcast from. Come listen to it. We have the free show obviously weekly, similar to what Ralph and the guys do with Saints Happy Hour. And you can listen to the free show. We do have a Patreon feed. Hey, if you love us, check us out on Patreon. We do a bunch of other stuff on Patreon, like we cover World Class Championship Wrestling, which had the Von Erichs, plus all of like the WCW and NWA pay-per-views. We cover those as well on our Patreon feed, along with the Clash of the Champions from the 80s and 90s as well. So lots of fun stuff. We've been around not as long as Ralph and the guys, but for almost 7 years now.
Long time,
yeah, it's been 7 years now, so it's a lot of fun, man. We have a lot of fun. It's myself, Hardbody Hopper, and Doc Turner.
By the way, his podcast is a top 20 fucking wrestling podcast in the world. Just so you know, so it's
we try.
Legit. We try. So, final thing, this is patrons only podcast. You get this one, patrons only. Use the link in the description to set up your custom RSS feed, so you can get all the podcasts that you pay for. And you want the breaking news with the Saints, free agency, coach and hire, everything going on. You're going to want that. So just click on that link. I did an instructional video and you can watch it. It takes like 4 minutes to set up. It's well worth your time and it's a perk you pay for. So do it. So for Mike, I'm Ralph. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting the show. Remember, it was Bobby Hebert's fault Jim Moore didn't win a playoff game. If there's one thing from this podcast you take, it's that. All right. So for Mike, I'm Ralph. We will see you Monday night on the live stream. Bars closed.